I'm going to show you some techniques you can use for potatoes, carrots, aubergines, courgette, all the foods that are kind of round and lumpish. The easiest way with a carrot, or any of these foods really, is to cut them into planks. Now the way I normally describe it is, imagine a tabletop. That's what you're after. So you're going to cut a little, just a tiny little wedge. Can you see? It's really not that big. So that you have a stable surface to lie your carrot on, because anything that wobbles, it creates a risk of you slipping and cutting yourself. The next step is to cut planks across. Now, can you see here I actually do need to do a bit of pressing, but I'm using my claw, I'm keeping my fingertips out of the way. And with the final piece, because it's really hard to do the claw when it's that small, I'm going to use my bridge hold, and I'm going to do one final plank. There you go. Now, can you see they look a little bit like a tabletop? That's what we want. And the width or the thickness of your tabletop determines the size of your eventual stick or cube. So the bigger your tabletop, the bigger your stick is going to be, and the bigger your cube. So you can determine how big you want the end product to be. Now I'm going to use my claw, and then I'm going to do the rocking motion again. I'm going to cut them into sticks. Now this would be super for a stir fry, or for dipping, or for snacking. I'm going to show you how to turn it into cubes if you wanted to make, for example, a bolognese, or maybe a curry that you want little pieces in, or maybe even a soup. Let's have a look. Again, I'm going to do my claw. I'm going to use my pinky and my thumb to keep them together so they don't slip and slide, and the other 3 fingers just on top, and then I'm going to start chopping that way. Again, with my rocking motion back and forth. There you go. Can you see those perfect little cubes? Now, if you wanted just rounds of carrot, you would also ideally make a tiny little flat edge, although I try often and find a natural flatter part of the food that I'm chopping. If you roll it around and it kind of lies still, can you see there? It just found its own resting place. Then you know it's quite stable, and you can use that as your flat side. And you're just going to do rounds like that. Again, if you want to make it look even more elegant, you can go on the diagonal, and then your carrots become quite exciting actually. Look at that. Really nice. Great. And we're going to do the same with the potato. We're going to cut planks. I'm going to show you how to prepare for maybe oven fried chips that you can just toss in a bit of olive oil with a bit of salt and pepper and pop in a hot oven. And this is how you would do it. Actually, for chips in the oven, I don't even peel my potatoes. I really like the peel on. I think it gives it a little bit more of a chewiness. Right, I think that side is quite stable, so I'm going to use that. Now, I don't want the planks to be too thin because I don't want my chips to be too thin, right? So we're going to do relatively big planks. I'm going to show you, just be careful with potato. The starch makes your knife quite sticky, so just be careful when you try and remove it. There you go. Can you see that's quite a big plank? And then you can just use your bridge hold and cut through like that. And that gives you some really nice chips to fry in the oven, to bake in the oven. This is a piece of kale. They have a stem or a rib running down the back. Now, those ribs are really tough to eat and very fibrous. If you're going to make a soup with the kale, don't bother about taking them out because you'll just blend it all up. But if you're cooking this as a side dish or maybe to go into a curry, then what you would ideally want to do is just pull the leaves. Can you see? You just pull it along so that you end up with the rib, which you discard, and all you've got left are the leaves. Now, I would always recommend buying cabbage, or kale especially, unchopped. I know there are some supermarkets that sell the packets that have the chopped up kale inside. It makes it really hard to find the ribs for a start. You have to go through every little piece and tear off the hard rib. But also, because it's pre-chopped, the leaves have started to oxidize, which means they're losing their nutritional value. So buy them whole in bunches rather than the little chopped up pieces. It looks like it might save you time, but ultimately it doesn't really. And it also is of low nutritional quality. Tomatoes, have a look. I find the only thing I really use my bread knife for is bread or doughy things. and tomatoes because you need a really sharp knife to get through the skin on a tomato. Now, this one is really sharp. I'm just going to show you. For little ones, I normally halve them from the little tip where the stem would have been to the other side rather than through the middle. It's preference, but it means they look slightly nicer. I'm going to show you the difference actually when I do it like this. So can you see this keeps the juice and the seeds in quite tidily, whereas this would then maybe make a bit of a mess. So depending on what you want to do with them, if you're just cooking them down in the pan, this is fine. If you're doing a salad, maybe this is a better option. Garlic, this is a good one to know. There's a very special trick that you can use to peel your garlic and to crush it. This is the only time I would ever use a paring knife and to peel my garlic like this, only if I needed the clove whole for whatever reason. Either I'm going to slice them and deep fry them, or maybe I want to put them whole into a dish. But for every other purpose, the best way probably to deal with a garlic clove is to take your big knife, point the sharp edge away from you, the blade, and then you just give it a little push. I usually go onto my toes to do this, just to add that bit more weight behind me. But can you see it makes it really easy just to pull the peel off in one go? It's great. Then I remove the little stem bit, and then I always check the inside. If there's a green shoot on the inside of the garlic, you should remove it. Right, now that we've peeled the garlic, this is a good opportunity to show you how to use your chef's knife to chop something really finely. If you have a garlic press, you can use that, obviously, but I find it's a piece of kitchen equipment or gadget that you don't really need, as you can just use your chef's knife. I also think that sometimes if you need it really finely chopped, you'd rather grate the garlic or maybe crush it with some salt, which works really well. But let me show you the chopping motion. This is a technique you would use to chop things like herbs, maybe chilies, anything that you want in really small pieces. Can you see I'm putting my other hand on top for stability, and I'm just running my knife across, and then every now and then I'm just removing the bits that are stuck. Now, be sure when you do that to always go from top to bottom. Don't go the other way because you might cut yourself, especially if it's a new knife and it's really sharp. Let's keep going and I can show you what it looks like if it's nicely chopped. If you have herbs, and I'll show you this later when we do a recipe, it's good to start with a really tight bunch, so almost pressing it together so that you're being really efficient as you run your knife along. There you go, that already looks much better, doesn't it? And that's your chopped garlic. Brilliant. Now I'm going to remove all of these things and put them in my bowl. Many recipes, savory recipes, start with the same thing, chop an onion. So this is a really important thing. You need a sharp knife for this. You're going to first of all trim off the top or the flower end, which is where the flower would have been. And then just, if there is any hair, or what they would call a beard, you can just trim that off, but do not, under any circumstances, cut away the root. The root is what keeps all the layers in the onion intact, and that's what's going to help us chop it without everything falling apart and going all over the place. So I'm going to stand my onion upright. Actually, do it through your root so you know where you're going. Can you see I've cut it along like this? Now, when you look at the inside of the onion, you can actually see that darker bit. That's the root, and that is where all the other layers are contained. So if you cut that away, the layers will start falling apart. Now, I think you will have noticed also that I haven't yet peeled my onion. That is because it's a lot easier to peel an onion when you've halved it, because you're actually able to go under the layers and just very easily pull away the top one. Now, I often get asked by my students how many layers of onions to peel away. My answer usually is, if it feels leathery or it looks a little bit dry, take it off. So that might be one layer, might be 2 layers. And sometimes, if your onion has been lurking around for a long time, it might even be 3 layers. But normally 1 to 2 is what I would expect. Now, can you see my onion is really clean, but I've still got the root intact there, and this is where our next step comes in. Have a look. At culinary school, I was taught to lay my onion flat and then cut layers all the way to the back, but not through the root. Can you see? Now I find it quite hard actually because I'm tall. This is totally up to you. You can do it this way, but because I'm tall, I've now developed my own technique, and so I stand my onion upright and I actually do my layers like this. That way I can also see exactly what I'm doing, and there's no need for me to bend over. Great, now we've got our onion in like a little bit of a book, almost with pages. Can you see? They're all attached at the bottom, but the layers are distinct all the way through. Now you're going to lay it down, and you're going to use your claw, and either your little paring knife or your chef's knife, you're going to again cut through those layers, but keeping your root intact. So I'm going all the way to my chopping board, but not all the way to the root. So that when I'm done with this step, I will have had cut a grid. Can you see that? So I've got cuts going along that way and cuts going along that way. And so far I've only lost a few pieces, which is completely normal. Now we're going to use the claw to keep them together. So pinky on that side, thumb on that side, and the other three on top. And we're going to cut across. And once you've cut across, you will notice all your beautiful little dice. Can you see that? And it's because you've cut your grid beforehand, you're able to do that. This is probably the most practical skill in the kitchen, how to chop an onion properly. Let me just show you one last thing with the onions. Sometimes if you're making a stir fry, for example, or if you want to roast onions in the oven, dicing them would obviously not be the most ideal form of cut. That's why we're going to either do salad slices, which is this way, just without having diced them. You can do some slices. That would be nice for a salad, for example. Or if you want to keep them even more stable, so that they're still intact, you will cut them through the root into maybe quarters or eighths, and then you can pop these in your roasting tin with whatever you're roasting in the oven, maybe some other vegetables, maybe a roast or a chicken, and that way you know it will caramelize beautifully without falling apart. So when you do dish up, you've got bits of onion rather than little ones floating around. Great, I think we're ready to get started on our first recipe.